Fantastic. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Just Two Dads with my co-host, Shawn Francis. I am Brian Altunian, and today's special guest. This is going to be a real conversation. I'm somewhat prepped for this conversation, but we're going to hear from a warrior mom. I think it's going to blow your mind. So be prepared here today on Just Two Dads. Awesome. Well, welcome again, everybody. I would like to thank everybody for joining us. If you're joining us live on Facebook, we want to hear from you. Or if you're catching us on other podcasts, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, Spotify, wherever you get podcast outlets, welcome. We hope you can add value. Please contribute and share. We're happy to have this be an engaged conversation. When Shawn and I started this conversation really 5 years ago, we literally were just two dads talking about our shared experiences of being parents of special needs children. And the more conversation we had with other people who were servicing and serving that community, the more that we realized that this is a community that there's an opportunity for a lot of collaboration, integration, and sharing common experiences. And so for all of our viewers and our listeners who have this is our 51st episode. We're pretty excited about that. We're almost at 52. Started this podcast about a year ago. We've expanded to not only podcasts, but we're also on WSTX radio in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and soon to be live on a Roku channel about empowered media. So we're pretty excited about the reach. So hopefully we're engaging folks in conversation about what it's like to be a member of and to serve and support the special needs community. So excited about today's conversation. Before we get to our special guest, I want to say hello to my partner in Thrive and my business partner, my colleague, Shawn Francis. How are you doing today, Shawn?
I am. Every time I get ready to answer that, I'm thinking people are out there saying he doesn't really feel that way. He says that every week. But I am blessed and eternally grateful. You know, I was having a good day to begin with, but as we get ready for the show, I was like, oh, it's almost that time. And I get kind of charged up. And so I'm grateful. And our guest today is none other than Miss Michelle Hobgood. Michelle, welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Good.
Great.
We like to tell people that, when we have people on the show, we tell them that it's their show. We're just here to facilitate. We created this to shine a light on people in the community and uplift them, and as the longer we do this, you'll have names that are bigger in terms of recognition, some that are not as much so, but each person in spirit is huge in terms of what they do. And I know that that most definitely applies to you in our conversation. So you've got a bunch of different things that apply to your journey and special needs. And so let's talk about, every hero has an origin, because that's where your powers come from. And for most of us, our powers come from, our family. In some cases, the powers help us. In some cases, they hinder us just a little less, but they dictate what kind of parent we become and ultimately what kind of quote unquote special needs parent we become. And I want to preface one thing. In the course of the show, we've found ourselves saying that, there is no such thing as special needs. There's only human needs. Everyone has the same need. Everyone needs to know that they're loved, that they are heard, that they're seen, and that they matter. If you have a disability as a result of a diagnosis or catastrophic injury, you may need more of the same thing that everyone else needs in terms of some accommodation, but there is no such thing as special needs. Now, with that being said, there are different things that take place, based on a person's experience as a single mom, as a woman, period, as a woman of color, who has found her way towards making her own income by creating a business on her own time and her own schedule, which is something we'll talk about as well. And finding your path from a single parent to marriage, and that with an interracial marriage. There's a bunch of different things. So let's start with the origin and everything.
We're not going to have
one thing.
We always hit the hour and we're like,
we never have enough time. So but let's start there and start with the other thing that at least you and I have in common, which is our background being from the Caribbean.
Right. Yeah. So hello, everyone. That was quite an introduction there. I will say that first off, I consider myself to be what you call an OG autism parent. My son is 27 years old. And many times people think that we are siblings and that I am not his mother, including one of my neighbors the other day who just completely said, yeah, how's your brother doing? And she's lived in this building for like 10 years. And all this time she thought my son was my brother and that the home health aide was actually his mom.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's a huge compliment to you. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know.
So for people listening, you're in New York, right? Where in New York City?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Little Caribbean.
Right.
Yeah. So with regards to my son, I actually had my son when I was a freshman in college. And it was quite an experience because I was the first person in my family to go to college, a 4-year college. My mom she left Trinidad and came here, and she went to Fashion Institute of Technology. I don't know if anyone knows that, but it's like FIT. It's a prominent fashion school in New York City. And my family, I come from a line of seamstresses and tailors. So my mom went to school for that. But I was the first one to to go to a 4-year school. So when I popped up pregnant in my freshman year, let's just say that did not that did not go over pretty well with my mom. I was 19 and a half, and my mom was just like, what, it was the end of my freshman year, and she's just like, what are you doing? Like, what's happening here? So my family was not happy. My extended family as well. There was just like this bet, like what's going to happen with Michelle? She's going to be a single parent. What's going on? This is not good. And they had me destined for just the worst. Like if you have a baby at 19, your life's over basically. But I totally proved them wrong because that's not what happened. I will say that having my son at such a young age, it was quite an experience in the way that I was treated. I had really good prenatal care, but my son came early. He came like a month early. And the doctor that I was seeing was actually on vacation. So I ended up at a public hospital, not the best hospital here in Brooklyn, Brookdale Hospital. And I did not know anything about labor and delivery. Whereas nowadays you're in labor. Oh, I'm going to go to the hospital and I'm going to have my labor there. That did not happen. I went to the hospital. I said, I'm in labor. I got sent home 3 times. Yep. And they said, come back when you're dilated.
Right.
So the 4th time I said, look, I'm not going anywhere. And they finally admitted me. And my son's father, he was there with me. And it wasn't the best experience for me. I had just like an on-call doctor who was also another Black Caribbean man who just was not nice. During my labor and delivery, he told me not to scream, not to yell, to be quiet. Wow. Yes, he talked down to me. It was basically just like a really horrible experience. Very traumatizing, which to this day, I'm not a fan of hospitals. So my delivery wasn't really the best. Once I had my son, because he was born prematurely, there were several things wrong with him. He had microcephalia. He had to stay in the hospital for about 2 weeks until he was able to feed correctly. He was in an incubator. And my mom actually was away at the time when I had my son because no one was expecting me to give birth a month early.
Sure.
So my mom was actually in Canada at Caravana, which is like a popular Caribbean
festival.
In Canada. So
in Canada, of all places.
Right. Yeah. She wasn't there to help me and support me and advocate for me at the hospital. I was just basically just me and my son's dad. So she came home. We left the hospital. My son, he came home with me, and fast forward a couple of months later, my mom is just kind of like, your son is not doing certain things that he should be doing, for, a baby of this age. He's not rolling over it this way. He's not doing this time.
And only a couple months old at the time.
Right. And I was 20 years old when he was born. So I had dropped out of school. I was home. I was working part-time. And I knew that because he was premature that he may have had some delays.
Sure.
He also was born with two inguinal hernias, and he had like skin tags on the side of his ears. So at 3 months old, he had surgery to correct the hernia and to remove the skin tags. But he was doing fine up until then. So after my mom kept forcing me to, have him tested, have him checked out, because I would go to his regular checkups and the doctor was like, oh, he's getting big or he's doing well, but they would never say to me, your son's not hitting these milestones. So it was my mom pushing me to send him to a neurologist, and we did some testing. And I will never forget the day I went in and did the testing. It was another doctor, not a Black Caribbean doctor, but just a doctor in a clinic affiliated with the hospital where he was born. And it just was a lackluster experience. They didn't ask me many questions. They did the testing they were supposed to do. I went back in for the results, and the doctor sat me down, and it was just very matter of fact. Like, yes, your son has developmental delays. He is, at the time, they used the word retarded. They said he's mentally retarded.
They said that?
Yes, it was on the paper. And you have to remember that this is 27 years ago.
I know. That's one thing that I was going to ask you, because the one thing we always talk about is, because Brian's daughter, Jordan, is just, a little younger. And even by 5 years, the services you have change, the way people treat everything changes, but still, even though you're going back 27 years, and I know that once upon a time, we didn't even use the term, the R word. It was just okay. Because when I was a kid in school, it didn't have the same, it still blows me away. I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah, it said mental retardation, extreme mental retardation.
That was the term that they used.
Yeah, developmentally delayed, pervasive developmental disorder, microcephalia, like just all the jargon. And I'm 20 years old. So he's just reading down all this stuff. And he goes, yeah, just sign him up for the clinic to see the neurologist. And thanks for coming. Not okay, well, let's talk about this. There's no sense of anything of like, let us try to comfort this parent. And I always say when I tell this story that it's just kind of like someone's telling you something and you hear them talking, but their voice is an echo.
Right. We say
Brian says that all the time.
It's like a Charlie Brown card. Wow, wow,
exactly.
Wow, wow,
Exactly.
Doesn't make any
and
sense.
I just sat there and I heard this doctor talking to me, and every time I tell a story, I get emotional. I just kind of like, okay. And I took the paper and I left. So I'm 20 years old. I'm a freshman out of college. I'm a young mom. I have a Caribbean parent who there was one other person in our family in Trinidad that had Down syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
But that was it. And on my son's father's side, he didn't have anybody in his family line that had any kind of special needs or developmental disabilities or anything of the nature. So I went home, I explained to my mom what happened. And she says, well, does he have Down syndrome? And I said, no, Mom, he has autism. He has, I showed her the paper, and she says, but I don't understand. What is autism? What is this? Like, she didn't understand any of it. So he started going to early intervention as young as, I think he was about 2 years old. They would come and pick him up, the yellow bus here in New York City with transportation. They would put him in the car seat on the bus, and they would take him off to a small preschool that was owned by a Jewish organization, Hebrew Academy for Special Children. I'll never forget it. And he stayed in that school from 2 years old all the way until he was 12 years old.
Wow.
And he did really, really well there. But I always credit my mom with, at first when my mom would nudge me and say, she would say in her voice, something wrong with that child. That child, something ain't right. She would, she would come up in her Caribbean accent and just, Michelle, I that's something wrong with this child, and, she would just say, and that was just her way. And I would just listen to her, and I'm like, I knew something was wrong because I had other friends who had brothers and sisters that were babies around our age, or other friends, because none of my friends had kids at that age.
Right.
Most of my
right.
friends were like in college,
And
you
let
know,
me-
living college life.
Did you go to grade school at least in Trinidad? How old were you when you came to New York?
So actually, I was born here in America,
Mm-hmm.
and I at 3 years old, my mom wanted to go to FIT, like she wanted to go back to school, and my dad
Right.
was working. So they actually sent me to live in Trinidad with my
Mm-hmm.
grandparents. And
Okay.
I stayed in Trinidad from the time I was 3
Mm-hmm.
until I was 6. And when I was 6, I came back to America and started the first grade. So for
Okay.
me, my experience is, even though I am American and I was born here, I have that experience of coming from Trinidad. That's my earliest memory.
Right.
Starting a school in America with what we call what Americans would call a coconut accent.
Mm-hmm.
The kids made fun of my accent. They called me a coconut. They called me African booty scratcher, like all types of names that they would call people that don't have an American accent.
And these are black people that were calling you that too,
Yes,
probably, right?
yes, yeah. And I
yeah.
was going to a private school for black people where mostly Caribbean children, you know, they were kids of Caribbean immigrants that they
Right.
they didn't want to send their kids to public school. So
Right.
back then it was only just like a Protestant school for like Caribbean Protestants, or Catholic school. Those are the
And
only
here-
two private schools available.
Here's the reason why I asked, because going back to the R word, right?
Yeah.
When I was a kid, and I don't think this is limited to the Caribbean, but this is my experience, because by the time I came to the States, I was like in high school. But in the Caribbean, and from what I understand, it hasn't changed a whole lot. When you're going to school with someone that has special needs, it's something to either not take seriously or make extreme fun of.
Right.
And so, and I was going to ask you, was that any different in your environment growing up, where that is what took place as well?
Yeah, I mean, it was more about the make fun of,
Yeah,
I remember
yeah.
in high school, you would, even growing up in high school, you are just hearing songs on the radio,
Mhm.
it was like the butt of like comedians and rap hip hop songs. And
Yeah.
it was just normal to say the word retard,
Right.
and it would just be like, oh yeah. And, or even, like just making fun of someone to their face because they
Oh, yeah.
have,
Because you figure they
a speech
can't.
impediment.
Yeah, they can't defend
Yeah.
themselves. They don't know, or using the word to define anything that didn't make sense. Oh, that's retarded. Like once
Right,
upon a
right.
time, not only was that okay with me, I might have
Mhm.
said that once upon a time. Obviously that's not the case now, and I think that's
Yeah.
where there's a teachable moment for a bunch of people. But I'm sorry, continue with your.
I'm just gonna,
And
the
it's
only thing,
super
Brian.
tricky.
Yeah,
I
go
was just
ahead,
going to
Brian.
add that, like that terminology initially, I mean, the term to retard or retardation is the slowing or
Stunt.
the pulling back. And
Right.
so from a clinical perspective, that they say development has been retarded, it's describing the development process. And so
Right.
if you've got challenges, issues, that in essence that's what's happened.
It was
the
made
development
of
has been retarded, and the challenge is that people then took that word and have now used it to describe. It wasn't intended to be
Right.
used that way, but unfortunately
Right.
we've adopted that, and it's a terrible word. And you're right, it continues to be used in derogatory terminology. And again, I'm glad we're having
Yeah.
conversations these days where people are being more sensitive about that kind of stuff. So by the way, last thing I was going to say, Michelle, is my mother was the same as your mom, without the
That's what I was
without
thinking.
the coconut accident. My mom was the one who nudged me that Jordan was having some delays, and I'm like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
So I totally can relate to that. I totally get it.
Yeah. I just didn't want to believe her, and I didn't want to accept. Yeah, I didn't want to accept that something was wrong with my child, but I knew deep down that something was wrong because he was born prematurely. His head was really small. He had the surgeries. And even when my son came out, the doctor that delivered him, he like looked at my son, like held him up and was just like, what's wrong with this? Something's wrong with this baby. Like, what's wrong with this baby? And the experience, anyway, I'm not going to like go dive into it,
Oh my
but
gosh.
like I always kept that in the back of my head. Like, is my baby okay? Like, what's wrong with I automatically always remembered him saying that. And I internalized that, like, something's wrong with my baby. So when my mom would just nudge me each, milestone, why is this not happening? I didn't always want to come to terms with it, but back to what you were saying about the word retarded. that's something that I actually never used because I had a cousin with Down syndrome and I hated that. And even when I would go back to Trinidad every summer, my mom would like ship me off back to Trinidad for the summer. She's like, I want my summer to myself. By the time the next day after school was over, it was like I had my suitcases. I was in JFK and I was back to Trinidad. So even though I was living in America from 6 all the way on, my first, second grade, third, like all the way up until like basically high school, I was going to Trinidad or either like Toronto in Canada to visit family. Every summer I was someplace else. And I remember that when I would go back to Trinidad, my cousin, Teddy, he was the one that had Down syndrome. The way that people would act in Trinidad towards him, they would make fun of him, or they would just kind of like think that he was stupid, that he couldn't do anything, that he didn't know anything. And he could talk really well. He his mom was very, make sure he was independent. And I always had like a soft spot for, so as I got older and I would hear my friends saying stuff like that, I would just kind of be like, that's not funny. I'm not laughing at that. And to this day, sometimes there are people around me that say, oh, that's so retarded.
That's what I'm talking about.
And I'll just be like, and they know that I have some special needs. And I'll have to kind of like say, hey, that's not a good word to say. That word's actually offensive. I was telling Shawn in our conversation that without, going too deep into it, where even in a working environment, I've been in situations where I'm very vocal when I have a job that I have a son with special needs, and I make it clear to everyone. So because if you don't tell people and they make jokes like that, not only does it show who they are, but if you let people know ahead of time, hey, this is my life and this is my story, they might be more sensitive to not say it around you. So when it is said around you after you've disclosed that you're a special needs parent, it kind of hurts even more. But it gives me the okay to just be like, no, that word's not okay. No, it's not retarded. I don't use that word. That word's actually kind of offensive. We're not using that term anymore. It never should have been used. And then be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I just really have to just work on changing my vocabulary and blah, blah, blah. I've literally stopped being friends with people because of that. And it's something that I'm very serious about. And even in work environments, I've had to like have very uncomfortable conversations in a work environment and say like, special needs slurs. None of these things are funny. It's not to be a butt of a joke. And they're not, and not everyone's comfortable with standing up like that and saying that to people that are your coworkers and sometimes your superior at a place that pays you. But it's a matter of, it's just not cool, so yeah. I lost my train of thought, but
that's okay. That's guaranteed. That's guaranteed with us. Yeah. But in keeping in that vein, because what I want to do is then talk about you're at this point a single mom and you're dealing with, with your son's development and going through everything. Tell us about the path that you took from there to your career, and then eventually from no longer being single and that whole dynamic as well.
Right. Okay. So with that, my son's father was in the picture for some time, just like part-time helping out. That did not go over too well eventually in regards to our relationship. And I'm not going to disclose much more than that, but it did not work out between the both of us. And I was pretty much left to my own devices and taking care of my son. Although I had dropped out of school, I went back to live with my mom. Eventually I moved out. I went back to school. I got my associate's degree, then I got my bachelor's degree, then I got my master's degree in exercise science. I've spent the past almost 20 years in the fitness industry, in corporate fitness, most really more of like corporate health centers where employees would go to exercise and, work out, take group X classes. The longest place that I've been has been at HBO in their health and fitness center here in New York City. Then we turned into Warner Media. I've worked at Emblem Health and Credit Suisse, all types of like corporate fitness centers. But prior to that, I was in the fashion industry for a while. and I was able to kind of juggle being a single parent and working at the same time. It was not easy. My mom continued to help me with my son. So for a long time, almost, I don't know, maybe like 12 years, I was a single parent working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, or I'm always juggling more than one thing, because not only do I want to live my life, I wanted to thrive. And I refuse to just be put into this box that my life is just about being a special needs parent. I am a vibrant Black woman. And at the time I was single, I would find a way to travel. I would find a way to go out with my friends. I would get babysitting. My mom would babysit my son, or I would use respite services, camp, summer camp, things of that nature. And I would plan my travel around summer camp. And, I was just like, look, this is the situation I'm in. My son is disabled. Yes. But I still need to find happiness for me outside of just being a parent. So I would just try to juggle it all. I would work, I would travel, I would date, I would just do whatever I could. And I feel like that was really important. In order for me to be a whole person for my son, I needed to be happy. Yeah, I needed to be happy. So I continue to just try to live my life, do the best that I can, work, have a career. I met my husband through a friend at a Lauryn Hill concert here in Brooklyn.
Let me tell you something. I just want to make, you'll see when you look at the playback, you're going to see, this is why we have to meet him eventually, because you're having the conversation about, I needed to do this, I needed to do that, I needed to do that. And you went, and I met my husband, and the light just came on. So I think that's fantastic. Continue. It was bright as can be.
He still makes me smile. I love him. He does get on my nerves because we're like about almost 12, 13 years in. But, it's real life, because I don't know anyone that has a perfect marriage. If your marriage is perfect, God bless you if you have a perfect marriage.
If it's perfect, you're not real.
Right. Something's wrong.
Right. So I met my husband actually going out and being social. A friend of mine invited me to, here in Brooklyn, we would have these Wingate summer concerts. And Lauryn Hill was actually performing for free at this concert. And I'll never forget, it was so hot, but she was notoriously late. And that was one of the first times that she started off being late for things.
Yeah.
We waited 3 hours and she still had not come out. Yeah. And that whole time, my friend showed up. She showed up with my husband, and he was visiting her from North Carolina. They went to college together, and whenever he wanted to travel to New York, he would crash on her sofa. Right. And she's like, "Oh, come with me. We're gonna go meet my friend Michelle." And it was him, my friends, and another girlfriend, and the 3 of them showed up. And when I saw him, I was just kind of like, who is that? Like, he's walking down the street towards me with my friend, and he's like really tall and like bald headed and like, just standing out in that neighborhood if you're like a white guy. Because back then the neighborhood was not integrated as it is now in Brooklyn, especially in Crown Heights. So someone like that is going to be like, people are going to be like, and and he was very attractive, and he showed up and he smiles at me, and I'm like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" And we just start talking, and the other young lady is there along with my friend. Now I know he's not dating my friend, obviously, but the other young lady is there. I don't know like what their dynamic is, and I'm not going to go and ask like, "Hey, what's going on between you two?" Like I noticed that he's attractive. I find him attractive. I'm nervous a little bit. But I noticed he's just talking to me the whole time, asking me questions. He's from North Carolina. He asked me, "So do you throw down in the kitchen?" And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, this guy's asking me if I can cook. He just met me like 10 minutes ago. He's just like, we're just talking and talking and talking the whole time. And then eventually the time passes and I now have to go and pick up my son from the babysitter because, he's at the babysitter. So I leave and I go home and, that's basically it. And my friend that introduced us the next day, she calls me and says, come hang out with us. We're going to go have Thai food in the city in Union Square. And, he's going to be there, and he's asking, will you come? And I'm like, who's going to be there? And she's like, Dave. And I'm like, he wants me to come. So now I'm like really nervous. I show up. He sits next to me at the restaurant. He's talking to me again. He asked me out. And I said, on a date, like me and you together. He's just like, yeah, that's what a date usually is. We meet somewhere, we go eat, hang out. And he's very I
was going to say, for people that don't know, that are listening, that haven't visited, aren't familiar with, or not from New York, when you say the city, that means Manhattan. Anything other than Manhattan, I'm going to the city.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I had never dated outside of my race before. Like, I've dated mostly Black men, Hispanic men, people that just kind of like flirt, but never really go any further to ask you out. Like, oh, you're pretty for a Black girl. A lot of people have said that to me, and just like, for a Black girl. Okay. And they think they're complimenting you.
Right.
And it's like, okay. So now I have this white guy who I'm attracted to, who's also seemingly looking like he's interested in me. And, culturally, I'm just kind of like really, like, my mind is blown, because keeping it honest and keeping it real with Black women that will date outside of their race, you are concerned that you're not being fetishized, it's not just, oh, you just want to date me because I'm Black, or because you want to try some chocolate, or just whatever. Like, I'm being honest here, so I was concerned, but because my friend vouched for him, I said, I'm going to give this a try. I like him, the person.
Right.
I'm attracted to him, the person. I like his appearance, the person. I don't care if he's white or Black. I'm attracted to this guy here. Right. And that was all that mattered to me. So we go on this date, and the date is amazing. I mean, the best date I'd ever been on in my entire life. He left. He went back to North Carolina because that's where he was, and we had long distance relationship for about 3 to 4 months. We got engaged. We met in July, and by January 1st of the following year, we were engaged. And then by August of the next year, we were married.
Now, when did he meet your son?
So he met my son in the fall. We met in July, and he met my son in the fall. So I think like around October, because you can't really, if you're in a long distance relationship, you can't really like come up and visit and then just like stay in a hotel every single time and never like actually go to the person's house.
Right.
Like, you have to establish at that point that, yeah, I'm going to go to this person's home and meet their family and meet their son and all that other stuff.
Right.
And when he met Devon, like, Devon loved him just from the jump. Like, he was just, and they're thick as thieves, those two right now. Like, they've been wonderful with each other since forever. But he loved him. My husband loved my son. And just instantly, everything just clicked. Just clicked. And at that time, I was in my 30s. I'm 45, I'm going to be 46 soon. I think I was like 32 or 31. So I'm a grown woman. I'm not like in my 20s trying to figure it out. Oh, I like him. No, I don't. Like, by that time in your life, you already know what's real for you, what's not real, and what your needs are, what your, things that are non-negotiable. That's like, no, this is not going to work.
Your deal
and
breakers.
All of that. Yeah, like all of that is already past. So I'm not.
You've already attained the superpower that one gets by becoming older and being grown folk. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I had already been through the dating scene, and the guys that were like, definitely would not date you if they even know you have a kid, but then you add on a kid with special needs and with abilities and stuff like that. Forget it. They don't come out and say it, but they ghost you, or just things like that. So by that time in my life, here's someone that's accepting of me, accepting of my son. My son loves them. I love this person. I don't care what color they are. Whatever, like, they make me feel good. I love this person. And that's all that mattered to me at that point, so but it wasn't always a, easy peasy, going. We
How is
had
it with your family?
so my cousin, I have a cousin who also was married to someone who's a white woman. So it wasn't like, oh my goodness, like who, guess who's coming to dinner or some weird, like some weird, like it wasn't like that. My
It wasn't
mom,
a novelty.
No, not at all.
Good,
And then
good.
in the Caribbean, there are people of all races, and it wasn't like a huge
Especially
thing where
in
it's like,
Trinidad, yeah.
yeah. And my mom loved my husband, and when I met his family, I didn't have any issues. I am not the first Black woman that my husband has dated, so it wasn't like a shocker when I went to go visit his family that I was Black. So it wasn't like, so that was also a thing as well that made it a lot easier to deal with. But I would say, like, we went through our usual things where just being an interracial couple, people would kind of like stare at us here in New York City, which even you think is a melting pot of all different types of races. When Black women date outside of their race, sometimes other Black men aren't necessarily always happy with that. People that are strangers.
That's different from a Black man dating a white woman or something. That's kind of like accepted or something like that.
Yeah, it's just kind of like when we would get this treatment. Or I'll give you a perfect example. We got married in Jamaica and had a wonderful wedding, no issues. We decided to go back, and we stayed in another part of the island. We stayed at a couples only resort. I will not say the name because I don't want you guys to, a prominent couples only resort that is big in Jamaica. Let's just say that.
Okay.
And we, right. So we get there, we check in. The first evening, we go to the restaurant. The young man comes out because, we're in Jamaica. So everybody's mostly Black working in the hotel. He comes out, he throws the menu on the table, and he walks away. And I'm just kind of like, okay, let me just chalk that up to, and no offense to any Jamaicans, but you guys know that you're not known to be, the most hospitable people. So we let's just say that. So I'm like, oh, well, being here in Brooklyn, you go to a Jamaican restaurant, people aren't that friendly. That's normal. Like, that's normal Jamaican. So that's okay. So I just chalked it up as that. Like, all right, well, this fine.
Yeah.
The next morning we get up, we go down to breakfast. It's another man, a different man. He takes us to go and sit down, brings us to our table, doesn't say hello, doesn't say good morning, just sits us down, throws the menu on the table, walks away. A different man. By lunch, we go to another restaurant. We walk up, hi, how you doing? No response, brings us to the table, doesn't even bring the menu. And now we're like, whoa, this is a pattern. Like, why is it that when we show up together and we're there's a male worker, they're treating us this way, they're being mean. And it happened 4th, 5th time. And by the 5th time, we had to go and speak to a manager. And it was just like, when we were at the pool, they didn't want to serve us. They wouldn't come over to get us drinks. I mean, it was just so blatant, like so blatant. And that was our first experience of being, like having someone treat us that way, because they didn't like the fact that the two of us chose to marry and love each other. Strangers that don't even know us, that have no say in our lives, that your opinion of us will not make your life any better, but you feel the need to let me know your opinion of what you feel about me, a stranger, and another stranger.
Well, once upon a time, that would not have been strange to experience in the Virgin Islands either, depending on who you were around. So those things happen. So let's switch gears a little. Here's something, this might sound odd, because I'm from the Caribbean, I'm from the U.S. Virgin Islands, a Black man. My wife is from Los Angeles. Her family is originally from Mexico. She's Mexican American. Our son is 15, diagnosed with autism at the age of 3. I have not had or had not had any experiences with regard to being a special needs parent that was identified or unique experience as a parent of color or child of color on the autism spectrum. And I had a conversation with someone who has a following on Instagram and had a podcast, and we had a conversation, and their whole brand, so to speak, is based on the Black experience as a parent of a child with autism. And I remember when I had my conversation with them, I was kind of like, when I walk into a room, if you give me reason, visually, I know if I'm the only brother in the room, right?
Right.
If the energy is cool enough, I forget that real quickly, right? But my antenna is up enough. But despite that, I still felt like I didn't have any experiences with caregivers, respite, ABA, anything like that was geared towards, any issue with regard to being Black. And so this person that has this organization, when I spoke to them, I kind of asked, so how did this kind of come about? And the first thing they told me is, well, they said that they're in Florida, right? And once they said that, then I just started thinking, maybe it's a little different because of where you are. They talked about what those experiences were like there. And so I want you to share, if you will, the type of, difference, because there's things that unite us all, right? Obviously,
Right.
You said there's no special needs, just human needs. But there are different nuances to one's experience based on culture and the way people receive you. Tell us about some of the experiences, because the other thing, and I know this is true for you, is that nobody likes to use their gender, their situation, or their color as an excuse for anything that falls short per se. But that does not change the fact that there are different experiences that one has. Tell us about some of those that you have had that people might take for granted, just having a kumbaya moment and not knowing that there's different hurdles to face as a Black parent to a child with autism.
Oh, well, I can say for a fact, there are, some biases and some microaggressions when you are a Black person dealing with people in the healthcare field, whether it is, for therapy or at your doctor's office or wherever, there are biases. I would remember, and even to this day, when I have to advocate for my son, I'm looked at as like aggressive, or that she doesn't play. It's so funny because my mom ran into somebody the other day. She was watching our son for us, and he was spending the weekend, and my mom was taking my son to like a store, and one of my son's old therapists drove past and yelled out, "Devon!" They yelled out my son's name, and they came out of their car and they started talking to my mom, and my mom's like, "Do you know my grandson?" And she's like, "Yeah, I used to be his therapist." And the first thing she says, like, "Devon is a joy. He's wonderful. And your daughter, she's wonderful. One thing about her is she doesn't play. She doesn't play." Like that's what her memory of me is that, not that I'm a good parent, but I'm that parent that's going to come in and be like, "Listen, this is, or just whatever." And it's not necessarily always like that for someone that is not Black. If I want something on my son's IEP to be changed, and I am adamant that this needs to be changed, I've been told that I'm being aggressive. Whereas someone that is not Black might just be like, "Oh, this parent is advocating and they really want to have these services and they know their kid. Why can't I just be that same way?"
Right.
Or even just little things where I know my son, I know what he needs, and this is what I think that he needs, and then be kind of like patted on the head for advocating. Like, "Wow, you're such a great parent. We don't see this very often." Or another example, my son goes to camp, and I want to make sure that the counselor has everything that my son needs. So I wrote like a camp manual, and it's in a binder, and it has like all of his needs and wants, the foods he likes, doesn't like, everything. Yeah, and it's like a binder, and it's like tabbed, and just,
Yeah.
and somebody said to me, wow, like I haven't seen any of the other parents do this. And what's the other? Like the other Black parents or the other all of the parents? You know what I mean?
And so, there's a gender piece to that too, because I don't think I would be given a lot more leeway than you would as a man in a situation like that too.
Yeah. So when I would have to fight for certain things for my son, and I would have to send 1,000 emails and 1,000 follow-ups, and it would just kind of be like, oh, I really do have to commend you for being such a great advocate, like patting me on the back, and I'm just kind of it's weird. But I noticed that with other parents that I know that are not Black, when I bring these things up, they're like, why would they say that to you? My God, I've never heard that before. No one's ever said that to me. And I'm like, yeah, because you're not Black. Like there's these biases that comes with that if you're first of all, especially if you're a young parent, that's bias number one. Younger parents don't know what they're doing. They're not educated. They're not smart enough. Number two, I'm a woman, even though I'm a woman, but I'm a Black woman. She's I don't know. Number three, I've been told you're so articulate. Wow, your email was so well written. Then when they meet me in person, it's just kind of like, oh, you're Michelle? Yes, I am. Or
you know what that means. Yeah.
Right. Or at work, they want to speak to the manager. I am the manager. You're the manager? Yes, I'm the manager. So there are all these different biases that come into play, and they roll over into being a Black special needs parent, because when you go and you advocate for your child at these meetings, they don't expect you to know what you're talking about, because sometimes they've come in contact with some other Black parents that might not know. They just generalize that all of us are the same. All of us are not educated. All of us are, on just whatever, and that has happened to me numerous times. And you, as a Black parent, you do need to have that community of other parents that understand your experience as well. So having that niche, as opposed to just the generalization of being a special needs parent, yes, we're all going to have that, but is someone that is white, they might have gone through that. They might have. When I have posts like that on my page, I get a lot of feedback from parents of all races, but the Black parents specifically identify because that is happening to them as well. And you need to have that camaraderie with someone that understands your story. So, like it is like you do need to have that.
Unity doesn't come just in, what we have in common. We get unity from our differences, because look at like the impetus of the show, Just Two Dads. The conversations we have, we're like, dads don't usually talk about this, or they're not expected to. They don't allow themselves to be vulnerable. Women get treated a certain way. Then you talk about women of color. So we need to acknowledge those sub communities and the differences, so that we can then eradicate the ones that don't need to be there, and celebrate the differences, so that that people can come together. That's the only way that takes place.
Right. Absolutely.
I think the biggest challenge that we see is that, like, first of all, there's just a lack of empathy in general, but conversations around special needs really are centering around inclusion. And so really what we're talking about is a broader sense of that word inclusion, right? As opposed to exclusion. I think many folks, as you were describing your experience back home, I was thinking about that's a lot of special needs families feel that discrimination, separated, excluded from the general conversation. Even when you talk about your child going back into a regular school, they talk about, going into a mainstream school, right? How do you get into a mainstream? And so the reality is, rather than forcing everybody into the mainstream, we have to look at how do we create inclusion that includes everybody, regardless of their, of their. So you're bringing up some amazing points here that a lot of that I don't face on a day-to-day basis. Jordan's mom and I didn't have those. By the way, she's a lawyer. She was a badass in IEP meetings, right? She was like, she was all over it, right? And they never said to her, "Oh, you're so articulate," right? They never said to her, "Oh my gosh, you're so aggressive." Although, I would probably describe her that way because I'm married to her, But the reality is, like, she was all those things, but they didn't describe her, and I think that goes back to what
she wasn't penalized for it. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So, anyways, it's a fascinating conversation. whole idea. And Sean says, we have a producer, Sean Hall, who's in Hawaii, who says, major needs, feel included and loved. I mean, that really is what we're trying to fight for in all of these conversations. Have more conversations so people get a perspective through empathy and love, and they go, oh my gosh, of course, inclusion, empathy, love, it's all part of the same conversation. And I knew that this was going to be a real conversation that was going to be, first of all, I've just sat here quietly because you're just like, I love listening to this conversation. It's amazing. And we're flying through our time as we usually do. Sandy, who is an IEP coach, I'll put this up on the screen. Sandy, who's our bilingual IEP expert, blows my mind when an assertive parent of another ethnicity is surprising. Why should that be the case, right?
Right.
Why?
An aggressive advocate. It should not be surprising. We're advocating for your child. So thank you, Sam, for commenting. Shawn, I know you have a question you want to ask before we get towards the end of this episode. So let's have that. Did we cover the things that you wanted to cover, Shawn, with Michelle? I mean,
I had one thing I was going to ask her really quick, just to tell us that I know that, like we said, there's going to be something where the bite that we give or get is going to be smaller than we would like. One of the things that any parent faces raising a child with special needs, married or single, is the control of time when it comes to the dollar that you have to make and a job and everything. You have found a way, working as a personal trainer, where you've built your business around your life and the time that your son needs for you. How did that come about, and how did you get into to physical fitness?
Well, I used to play basketball in high school, and I was in my freshman year of high school, and I was a point guard, and I loved basketball. And after I had my son, I was trying to find ways to stay fit. So I would go to the local Y and play basketball, or I would, try to start going to the gym. So I started going to a Jack LaLanne, Valley Total Fitness. Yeah, that's how old I am. And I would go and work out, and people would just kind of come up to me and start talking to me. I would work out with them, and the GM basically came up to me months later and thought that I was training these people like on the side. And he says, well, you can't train these people. And I'm like, I'm not training them. I've just made friends. They like working out with me. And he says, you should be a personal trainer. And I said, well, what's that? At the time I was working in the fashion industry. And, he says, you should be a trainer. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'll try that. So I went and I got my certification. I was doing that part-time while I worked in fashion. And then eventually I got burned out from the fashion industry, and I decided to transition into personal training. But I did not like the commercial aspect of working in like a sales gym where you have to sell packages to make money. So I went back to school and got my degree in exercise science so that I could work in fitness, but in corporate, where I was just a salaried employee. And I stayed in that field since that time. So I dabbled with I would always be a personal trainer part-time. I'd have my private clients, but I was either like a healthy lifestyles coordinator or a manager or a program manager at some type of fitness center. And I would always fall back on personal training. So when the pandemic started, I was working for a company that was a luxury real estate company. A fitness company for real estate corporations. And we had to pivot our product from in-person fitness to online, virtual. Right. And I ended up getting furloughed, and I reached out to some of my old clients from HBO and wherever, like people that I'm still in contact with, and they were looking to stay healthy virtually as well. And I already had the experience of, working with people virtually. So I just did my own setup here. And that's basically what I've been doing for the past year. I ended up being not just furloughed, but like laid off completely, because our industry in fitness for corporate fitness, a lot of people are not in their offices anymore. So programs like that are like basically gone until who knows when. So I've just basically transitioned to that, So what I do now is I have a lot of private clients. It's not something I like advertise as much on my Instagram page. My Instagram page is more for just advocacy and my life as a parent. But that's basically the whole gist of what I've been doing as far as with like my personal training, experience, and just kind of health coaching and body positivity, and just kind of like working with women and trying to just help them be happy with the body that they have right now.
Great. Why don't we let's get your Instagram on the screen there. What's your Instagram handle there?
So it's .m Hobgood.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
We want to make
yeah.
sure that people know how to reach out to you and follow you. So that elusive question that Brian was referring to that we always ask at this point in the show, depending on how you receive it, it could be very simple or it could be heavy. I don't know. But since everything that we do is about evolution and change and progression and trying to make the world a better place in some way, shape, or form, I'd like to ask if you could think of one belief that you held dear and really, really believe in with all your being and have since now abandoned and you think otherwise. Can you give one example of that?
So I would say to that initially I was a very cynical person before I was like on social media. I was very much where I thought that people were kind of like full of, SHIT and that there weren't that many good people in the world. But once I got on Instagram and I started to connect with other parents, I saw that there are a lot of good people in this world that actually care. And care about my son. That is like a perfect stranger that they see on a square, in their feed.
Right.
And being my authentic self and not some fake persona, that people are actually interested in that, So, and then the honesty and the real life. So I would say that I believe that there are good people in the world and people that are genuine.
That's great, because social media can be, with all its positive potential, such a reason for society's downfall in so many ways. So for you to have a mindset that's changed for the positive and for it to happen as a result of that, I think is that's tremendous.
Yeah.
Well, we're at that time, Brian, aren't we?
Yeah, no, for sure. This is fascinating. Michelle, I could listen to you talk all day. In fact, I got to start following you on Instagram just to get the whole. I just followed you, and I'm looking at some of the posts that you've put already in this.
And we suggest everybody else do the same.
Yeah, do it. You're going to be inspired, I think. And this was an inspiring conversation. And every time, again, we get to the end of the hour, like, man, how did that hour go by so fast? So thank you for being here and for being a part of this, and for everybody who commented. And Sandy, thank you for contributing and promoting. And Sean Hall and Hawaii, thank you for your contributions. Billy, Joe, all the folks that have commented. It's awesome to see you guys. Thank you for. This has been an inspiring conversation. And so I always say, at the end of our shows, like, empathy and love is what I talk about all the time. Now more than ever is so needed. We talk about folks who are dealing with special needs issues. You have no idea what people are dealing in their lives, what outside forces influence the decisions that they make. And so be empathetic, know that things, if you come from a place of love, you're not going to be faulted. You're going to find the good. As I was going to say, there's more people are finding negative things on social media these days. The reality that you're proof that good things come out of social media, and if it's used with love and empathy, you're going to have a lot better chance to connect with folks. So thank you for being here, Michelle, and I'll let Shawn close us out. And again, I appreciate. I had some technical issues today with my sound, so I'm going to mute here while we close out.
Well, again, Michelle, thank you for being here. This has just been a great experience. I'm thankful for Brian. I'm thankful for what we're able to do here and the platform that we have. And I want to encourage everyone to, subscribe to our YouTube page and share as well. And then, Brian, we want to make sure that we let everyone know about our Special Needs Summit that is taking place in September as well. The registration link is in the chat for those that are looking at us. Well, at least that should be it. That are actually watching either on YouTube or on Facebook Live. And I want to take a moment to thank the most important and prominent women in my life. That is my mom, Jan, and my wife, Laura. Without either of them, I couldn't attempt to begin to be who I hope to be. And sometimes, falter in that attempt, but the attempt is consistent. And so just remember, again, like we said, somebody out there needs to know that they're loved. They need to know that they're heard. They need to know that they matter. And again, we have more in common than we do otherwise. So thank you for joining us. And if you're watching or you're listening, we love you, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Michelle, thank you for being here. It was
welcome.
A conversation. Absolutely incredible. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you again next time on Just Two Dads.